Welcome to one of the flagship paper mills in the Smurfit Kappa Group. We hope you have a safe and enjoyable visit to our site. This is the general induction. There is also a small leaflet of information that accompanies this film. Please pay attention as there'll be a short test at the end to check for retention. Our vision is that every Smurfit Kappa employee and all of our visitors must return home safely to their families. Please do not take risks or cut corners with safety. Before every task, please stop and think, is it safe to do this, or is there a safer way? We prefer you to document that decision on our tick sheet risk assessment. This is in addition to any more detailed task risk assessment you may have. If in doubt, ask for help. Our site is certified to ISO 9001 for quality, 14001 for environmental management, 45001 safety, and 50001 energy. Our product is used for food packaging, so there are some specific rules on handling in some parts of the site. We're also proud to say that our product is 100% renewable, sourced from recycled paper, and is FSC certified. For further details on our policy, please check out the posters on the walls around the site and the additional information in your induction booklet. The site occupies approximately 40 acres of land, bordered by the river on one side and the railway on the other. A printed map is available from your host. There are several dangerous areas that you need to be aware of. We also have a few key site rules. Please read through them. The most important is to not enter areas that you don't have permission to. Stay away from vehicles. And being a paper mill, we operate a very strict no smoking policy. If you wish to smoke, please leave site at our main entrance first. As with all industrial and work sites, we also operate a strict anti-drug policy. If you're required to take medication whilst on site, please check with your host or line manager. The site is centered around the PM9 or Paper Machine Number 9 machine house. This is the big building in the middle of our facility. The minimum PPE when on site is safety boots and high visibility clothing. PPE should be brought with you, but if you need something, please talk to your host. Some areas have different PPE requirements depending on the situation. For example, in our boiler house, hearing protection is only needed when the boiler is running. Please double-check before entering these spaces. At the front of site, our gatehouse will be your first point of entry. Please sign in before going any further. This is part of our fire and evacuation procedures. Please park where instructed. The guard will then contact your host and advise if they are ready for you to come on site. They will then be able to advise you where to go to meet them. Just outside the gates area is the first of two external emergency muster points. As you move around site, please use the marked footpaths and crossings. These paths are blue with yellow lines on either side and often have barriers around them. Please stick to these paths for your safety and remain vigilant around moving vehicles. We have high-risk areas on site. There is a warehouse to the right of the machine house for storing our paper reels. This is the finished product from our site. Forklifts with reel clamp attachments, known as clamp trucks, move around quite quickly in this area. At no time should people and trucks be in the same place at once, unless under the strict instruction of the forklift truck driver. For example, when loading reels onto a heavy goods vehicle. The clamp trucks move reels of finished paper weighing nearly 3 tons from the warehouse to the waiting HGV vehicles. From here, trucks go all over the UK supplying our customers, mostly Smurfit Kappa corrugated division sites. Many of the forklifts we use are large and have significant blind spots where the driver will not see pedestrians approaching. Please stay away from their areas of operation. If you do need to approach a truck, please get the driver's attention and permission from at least 4 meters away first. The engineering building is located close to the logistics area, and this is where the engineering day team can be found. Please stick to paths and away from engineering equipment unless authorized. This is also the location of the canteen, a warm, dry place to sit and eat where hot food is available at lunchtimes on weekdays. There are also numerous toilet facilities around site. Please talk to a member of staff for the nearest location. To the left is the raw material yard. This also wraps around the back of PM9. In the yard area, there are both clamp trucks and HGVs manoeuvring. In addition to moving vehicles, there are large bale stacks of recycled paper. Please stay away from these stacks. A rule of thumb is to stay a distance of 1.5 times the height of the stack away. When the trucks are offloading and building the stacks, visibility is even more impeded. As with the warehouse, this is a strict no pedestrian zone. If you need to enter the yard, permission must be sought from the shift manager, who will inform the drivers first. Immediately prior to entering the yard from the PM9 stairwell, you can check they're expecting you with the radio found there. Behind PM9 is our core driller, used to sample bales. There is a barriered exclusion zone surrounding the driller. Do not enter this area without the operator's permission. Further up the roadway is where deliveries are checked into the yard after the weighbridge. To power our site, we operate a combined heat and power plant, or CHP. This small power station uses natural gas to generate heat in the form of steam, as well as electricity to run our site. Significant risks in this area include high-voltage electricity, hot surfaces, and asphyxiating gas used for the fire suppression systems. Entry to this area is prohibited without an access permit issued by the CHP team. Some areas are not just high risk to people, but also present a higher risk to the environment. As a responsible company, and one that is tightly regulated by the Environment Agency, we must prevent pollution. The main environmental risks are polluted water discharging into the Medway and causing damage to both the river and the site of Special Scientific Interest area of the Burham Marshes, excessive energy consumption and therefore increased CO2 release, and finally increased waste from site, particularly hazardous materials. Our water treatment plant is at the far end of site. The lagoon area has deep water and presents a risk of drowning. Do not enter the lagoon area without permission and a life jacket. There are also several other open water areas on site. Stay behind safety barriers at all times. In the water treatment plant is our anaerobic digester bund. This is where a large tower tank containing microbes breaks down our wastewater to allow safe discharge. It also produces biogas for use in generating energy. Please be aware that biogas is highly flammable and contains hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas which can be lethal in low concentrations. Do not enter this area without further guidance, and at a minimum you must be wearing a gas monitor. There is also a fixed gas detection system with traffic lights on entry to provide additional warning. The bund area has special zoned areas where normal electronic devices are not permitted. Please talk to the water treatment staff before any work in this area. To repeat, do not enter the bund area without a properly working gas monitor. Our chemical delivery point is behind the PM9 building. This is where we fill bulk chemical tanks and should only be operated by trained staff. Each chemical has a dedicated label fill point. As with many areas on site, equipment such as emergency showers and diphyterin spray, a chemical neutralizer agent, are available for use in an emergency. Around the back of the PM9 building you will find our reject skips. Again, operator visibility can be poor whilst these are being moved. Please stick to the footpaths. Driving routes are marked on site. Importantly, there are areas where no passage of vehicles is permitted. For example, at our chemical loading point, there is a narrow roadway to our yard. This is for forklift trucks only, not HGVs, vans or other general road vehicles, as there are low-hanging pipes, exit doors and difficult access into the yard from this tunnel. Please also be aware that the maximum speed limit for all vehicles on our site is 10 miles per hour. Our Ops Block building is where most of the day staff can be located, including the operations, manufacturing development, safety and engineering managers. On non-shut days, this is the place the engineering team will issue permits from. Adjacent to this building, there is the truck shop where we maintain our forklift trucks, and more importantly, our main site muster point in the event of an evacuation. Outside PM9, you will see the specific PPE requirements for entry. A supply of hearing protection and safety glasses are available in the stairwell. Make sure you're wearing these before entering the production area. Inside PM9 it's generally noisy and there are numerous chemical lines, making both hearing protection and eye protection very important. As with other industrial or chemical sites, if there is a drip, avoid it, and if one lands on you, walk away before checking the source. Within the building, we operate forklift trucks, and there are places where you can bump your head. Look out for the trucks, especially as you will be wearing ear protection and so your hearing may be impeded. Bump caps are a basic precaution to help prevent our otherwise most common injury, cuts to the head. The paper machine is on the first floor of this building and takes up the whole space. It has fast-moving, rotating parts, heat in excess of 100 degrees centigrade, and is noisy. We also operate a crane in this area. Please be very cautious as you walk around. The blue paths are deliberately several meters away from the paper machine. Please stick to these. They're also painted with a higher grip surface. Floors can often be wet, so please be careful with the increased slip risks. Any stairs onto the machine should be climbed and descended facing the stairs. Our main control room is located on the first floor. This is where we operate most of the paper machine and can pull up displays on all other systems on site. This location is manned 24/7 and is where the shift manager can provide you with assistance. At the opposite end of the PM9 building to the main control room is the dry end. Here the product is essentially finished. As a food contact material, we have stricter rules on access. This GMP, Good Manufacturing Practice area, has additional restrictions. There are rules posted, but essentially do not touch the product in this area. When the reels come out of the machine, they would be hazardous to anyone in their way. You should not enter the fenced-off area. There is also a walkway that goes over a metal conveyor. Please pay attention to the traffic lights. Do not step on the conveyor and wait until reels have passed before crossing here. You should also be aware that we keep bees. The area is well marked and footpaths are at a safe distance. All site emergencies, safety or environmental, are coordinated through the gatehouse and shift manager, who will contact the emergency services and relevant site personnel. The gatehouse is manned at all times. Please call them in the first instance for help with the exception of fire. The number is 01634 248 111. If you accidentally hit a fire call point or trigger an alarm, also call this number to report the false alarm. There are trained first aiders across site, all of whom have access to the first aid boxes and defibrillators, as well as their own first aid equipment. You will also find a first aid wall in the engineering building and PM9 control room. You should report any incidents to your host and complete the accident book at the gatehouse. This ensures we can check you're okay and implement any changes to prevent anyone else getting hurt. A first aid report should also be submitted for any treatment on site. In the event you discover a fire, please trigger the fire alarm by pressing the red call points. When the evacuation alarm sounds continuously, please exit the building and move to the muster point. Do not re-enter the building until the fire warden advises it is safe to do so. Contractors, please gather in your company team and your supervisor should confirm all are out safely to the fire warden here. In the PM9 building, we also have an intermittent alarm sound as a warning to the shift crew that a fire alarm has gone off somewhere else on site. In this case, you do not need to evacuate. If you're unsure, ask the Smurfit staff nearby. In the event of a fire alarm in the PM9 building, the shift crew will stay in the building initially. However, everyone else should always exit immediately at the closest point. If a fire occurs, and only if safe to do so, there are fire hoses across site to start firefighting whilst help arrives. But please raise the alarm first. Remember, different fire extinguishers are safe on different types of fires. Please try to select the best option. Generally, the correct extinguishers for likely fires are specifically located around the site. Spills must be cleaned up immediately, not only to prevent pollution, but also to prevent contamination of the mill drainage system, where most drains empty back into the mill water system and are used for manufacture of paper. Spill kits are distributed widely. These include basic spill clear-up materials, oil-specific clear-up kits where applicable, and chemical neutralizing materials. Please stop a spill at its source and contain where doing so is safe. Summon help as soon as you can for more assistance. Try to close a valve that is leaking and apply absorbent material from drains back to the spill to prevent further movement of materials. As with other UK workplaces, the Health and Safety at Work Act applies. There are clear responsibilities on all people at work. As a contractor, particularly, you must ensure risks are appropriately assessed and managed, including where work from one group can impact another. Therefore, we request risk assessments and method statements for work, and we expect you're familiar with the content of these assessments. We also expect a tick sheet risk assessment to be completed immediately prior to the work, to also allow assessment of items that may have been missed or not present at the time of the initial assessment. All work conducted must have a permit before it starts. Work should only start with permission of your host, and once completed, ensure your host is aware. For lower risk activities of scheduled work, an authorized SAP work order can be used for this permit, if issued by your host. Higher risk activities, however, must be permitted separately. These include entry into confined spaces, including access to our pulper and other tanks, entry into CHP areas, hot works, including grinding, welding, and use of electrical items in zoned areas, working at height, excavation, high voltage work, and braking containment. When working at height, we expect full restraint or arrest to be used when close to any edge, including on the paper machine. You should be trained in their safe use. This safety equipment must be connected to something suitable. If you have any questions about working at height, please talk to your host. We have working at height rescue equipment in the wet end control room or on each of the PM9 cranes, and many of the production and engineering staff are trained in rescue. On mobile elevated work platforms, you must be clipped into cherry pickers at all times and in scissor lifts when they're moving outside. Every time you use our equipment, you must have permission from a Smurfit Kappa authorized person. This will require proof of training. We have several small radioactive sources. They are in well-labeled and marked areas. If you're working close to or on one of these systems, please make sure you're following the appropriate procedures. Have permission from our radiation protection officer and are wearing a radiation dose badge. We also have some asbestos on site. It is routinely inspected and labelled. However, if you are in any doubt, talk to your host. Equipment must be isolated and energy discharged before access. Once isolated, a metal padlock must be fitted and an isolation record completed. There are very few second chances with the moving machinery or electrical voltages used on site. Suitable lockout, tag-out and try-out must be done every time. On site, absolutely everyone in hazardous locations being protected by an isolation must have their own personally identifiable padlock applied before entering the danger area. Please work with the operations or engineering team, particularly in the isolation office, to ensure you're locked on suitably. After work is completed, locks must be removed as soon as safe to do so. For example, you've left the hazardous area. This prevents delay to start-up or return to operation of equipment. Specific timing will also be posted for shuts. Occasionally, you may be working on your own for extended periods. Please try to avoid this, but if you can't, please ensure contact systems are in place at least every 30 minutes to check you're okay. Lastly, all waste that leaves site must be recorded with the weights and final destination points logged for our environmental reporting. This must be done on a waste transfer note for non-hazardous waste or on a waste consignment note for hazardous waste. The simplest method is to arrange with your host to use our on-site waste skips and bins. If this is not possible, please arrange all removals with the site CHSE manager. We all have a duty of care to ensure that waste is managed and treated appropriately by licensed carriers and facilities. That's it. Thank you for paying attention. Please now complete the questionnaire and give this to your host. This film is only a summary of our on-site health and safety policy. For further information or clarification, please refer to our full written health and safety documentation or ask your host.